Welcome to Comic Books and You. Today we're going to do Indigo Children Part 1 from Image Comic. It's also from a team that has been working together for a little while. They've done 3 other comics on Image and Dark Horse brand, so different brands. Fairly interesting book that I grabbed off the cover, simply. I found it intriguing. So that must mean the cover is some level of good for some people. We're going to get into the cover more in details as usual as the review goes on. We're going to start with our character. So the main character of this, even though he's not the protagonist of this particular story, would be Alexei. He's a young man who's originally from Mars. In a previous life, he lived on Mars as the planet was destroyed in, I think, would be a nuclear holocaust from what I've understood in this book and the second one. From a very young age, he was very advanced at everything he did. At 6 months old, he already had full control of his body, etc. And as he was a young kid, the teacher already found that he was a mathematical genius at MIT level while he was in grade school, always ahead of his peers. And that led him to where he is now as a young adult who's more or less trapped in a Russian city. He has the ability to see the past in a way. We're not quite sure how. He's got telepathy, so that probably explains it. He sees people memories and thoughts. He has supernatural abilities. Other than that, it allows him to fly and save people when an airplane explodes. So a fairly wide variety of powers. Seems to be wanting to help people more than anything else. Pretty interesting basis for a character here, but we don't get too much out of him in this particular book. The one where we see the most, basically the protagonist of this particular issue, is Donovan, who's a British journalist. From what I understand, he has a nice I Love London cup, keeps on drinking tea. That's a British thing to do, right? He's a journalist that's investigating the Indigo Children after he received an anonymous tip. He's dedicated to his job and wants to find the truth, and he's ready to go to great lengths to do it. He's physically fairly strong, I would say, and seems to be capable in terms of combat, because during the story he is attacked and he's able to overcome an assassin trying to kill him. So he does have some level of maybe not training, but at least combat capabilities. The format in this book is a little bit weird. It starts with a prologue and ends with an epilogue, which are tied together with the Donovan's story in the middle. So it's not a format I really enjoy. I like a story being either very linear or with nice flashbacks in it. It does kind of work. So we're going to go through that epilogue and prologue first, since it goes together and is in the past. So young Alexei boards a plane with his mother, and through his power, he notices that a terrorist on the plane and is planning to blow it up. They warn an air marshal, who tries to apprehend the man, but he detonates his explosive vest. That's the end of the prologue, and we see that this man in question is from Chechnya, and the whole story takes place in Europe, and a lot of it also in Russia. So it kind of makes sense to have this. Alexei uses his power to prevent anybody from dying from the blast. That's when his power are shown in full force and leads to the rest of the story, basically. This is the bit that we see in the epilogue. We then get into the actual gist of the story, the actual meat and potatoes. Donovan is showing an interview with Alexei, his mother, and a former tutor, where they're talking about how advanced he is and that he has an other life back on Mars, which is a bit confusing. It's on a tape, and when the tape is done, he tries to ask question to, I think it's the interviewer in that particular video, and she basically tells him to leave rather than giving him any answer. He goes on Thor, the dark web, and starts chatting with someone who gives him some coordinates in Russia where he would be able to get some more information. Goes to Russia, drives to that particular location where he meets with Alexei's former tutor, who turns on a white noise machine so that they're not recorded or listened to, and he gives them information about a town that is not a town, which is basically Alexei's prison. Everybody in the town is KGB or former KGB or all sorts of federal agents for Russia, making sure that Alexei doesn't get in trouble and that the whole place stays there to protect them. When he's done giving his information, Donovan is asked once again to leave fairly directly. He goes to his hotel, goes to take a nap, and an assassin shows up saying that he's going to Epstein him. Literally, that's in the in the dialogue here. The assassin tries to strangle him, ties him to a pole, but the pole breaks. He falls down, and Donovan uses the pole to bash the assassin's head in. The next morning, he meets with a Russian contact who he gets to send a cleaner to his room to get rid of the body. And they set themselves up to go to the town that's not a town by stealing a boat, then stealing a cargo truck to sneak into town. He also has an EMP generator that's supposed to block a whole lot of things, but it doesn't quite work as expected and breaks down when he gets into the town. Alexei, however, telepathically contacts Donovan and brings him to a secluded house outside of town that's broken down. They do meet, they have a little bit of a talk, but as they're starting to get into the gist of their discussion, a large number of heavily armed soldiers show up and try to arrest them. That's how this particular book ends. I find that kind of story extremely interesting and very motivating in a way. You've got a lot of things going on. You've got a very interesting character in that journalist and everything that's going around in that weird thriller. This is the kind of book that I personally enjoy reading outside of the superhero genre often enough. And it's not a style that is used very often in comics. We're going to go back on the cover. It's a very weird cover for an American comic. There's no action, the color's muted. You have that indigo stroke in the middle there. That's what brings the view to it. It's the kind of cover I would expect from a European artsy fartsy comic. You have that style in a certain number of those more modern European comics. It'll attract the eye of a connoisseur, someone who really reads a lot of comics, someone who has that bit of experience there with maybe foreign styles and foreign genre other than straight American comic books will be more interested in that cover than an 8-year-old with $7 in his pockets who's trying to get a few comics to be able to read on over the weekend. Doesn't happen very often nowadays, but that should still be your target audience. Speaking of which, for a target audience of this, it's not going to be your average reader. It's going to be someone who's a bit more into that international style of comics, or maybe into a style that is changing, let's say. Paper quality is a step up from the standard DC fare, but it's not really high quality and it feels rough to the touch. You're flipping through the pages. It has a bit of a newspaper feel to it. Not awful, not wonderful. The ink's not bleeding from it. That's where it's pretty nice. The cover is your typical floppy fare. Nothing special there. The problem is this is a rather thick book. It's longer than most regular floppy. And with that style of cover, I already see wear and tear on it with me reading it maybe 3-4 times, my kid reading it twice. Not the best choice here. I would probably have gone with the standard cardboard instead. There's no real ads in the book outside of on the inner back flap, where we've got an ad for the other books written by this team. It's only a Teenage Wasteland, which I've heard of, Youth and Olympia, that I have no idea what it is. Artistic merit, this is a very weird comic overall. It doesn't have that cartoony look you can get from manga or European comics often enough. It's not hyper realistic like other European comics or a lot of American comics. It's a weird style where a lot of the backgrounds and a lot of the surrounding things are very detailed, while the characters and such are somewhat muted. It has, once again, a very European style to it. I've seen that kind of style in European books. Not a bad thing either. It's a style that is a bit different. It's the kind of thing that you need to get used to. You read this book for the first time and you're going to be wondering what's going on a little bit for the art. You might be picking on things like some of the coloring seems odd, some of the expressions seems very, very muted. You don't have any raw emotion in the faces outside of very few time with Alexei. It's a bit different from what we're used to. The characters, however, are very distinctive. You easily recognize Alexei, you easily recognize the contact, Donovan, Mother. They pop out very easily. Background characters don't pop out as much, and there's not much as much details on them either. Once again, something that is different and a style that you have to get used to. I will agree though that the coloring is a bit weird. And sometimes with the way the coloring is done, you'll be like, okay, well, does that character have a mustache or is it just poorly colored in this particular panel, as an example? Is it a deal breaker? No. Is it awful? No. But it could use some work. The background in this are actually really good. And they have just as much definition as is needed, which gives it a bit of a puzzling look. You're always as if you're in a dream through a lot of those panels, which is fairly interesting. I kind of dig it. Like this here, the airport and coming in and coming out of the airport, you've got all the cars, everything. It's what's needed for this kind of style, and it works really well. There's only really one fight scene in this particular issue. It's the fight between Donovan and the assassin. It's gritty, it's brutal. You don't have too much blood, you don't have gore, but when the head gets bashed in, you do see blood, basically. It's not a fight like superheroes punching each other through walls or things like that. This is an actual fight. Mechanical designs in there are also pretty good. I've said it multiple times now. Artists nowadays have it easy. You've got tons of reference material everywhere on the internet. But here we have a little bit of everything. We've got the cars. We saw some in the previous panel. We see the top one here with the car leaving the tutor's house. We've got a jet boat. We've got an airplane. The airplane's a bit weak. I will agree there. If you look at it, it doesn't look the greatest, but it's functional. It's nice that we have a little bit of everything. We also have a VCR that looks like a VCR, a laptop, a cell phone. Here we've got an Android phone here on the side. Here we've got a Nokia. It might be the Nokia, but in Russian, actually. I'm not sure here. I don't speak Russian. And we've got a GPS. What I find a bit cool here is that all that technology is really, really well rendered. Those are probably the clearest and cleanest picture in the. Is it intentional? Maybe. Is it not? Maybe. I'm not sure. But it has a special look to it and it gives it a bit of attitude. Unfortunately, the panel work in there is fairly weak. You've got no bleeding panels. Full pages are fairly weak. I don't think there's even a full page. There's a few cut pages with no text, but nothing super imaginative. It's not a deal breaker, but it could use maybe a good editor to move the panels around or someone with a bit more imagination working on it. Like I said, not a deal breaker, but I would appreciate something a little bit better. Story element wise, I've got a bit of an Umbrella Academy-ish feeling to it. Not the horrible Netflix series. Let's forget about that as much as we can. The actual Jared Way and Gabriel Bach comics that are really good. At least it's my opinion. Maybe it's the Chosen Children kind of thing. Maybe it's the Alien kind of thing. They're here to save the world. Wow, that's a nice misspelling on my part. No, when you ear their ear. Oof, that was an horrible sentence. Once again, it has a bit of that feeling. I'm not sure it's going to, well, I'm definitely sure it's not going to go in that way. But it's interesting nonetheless that those indie style comics work together. I also remember an old YouTube video I watched a long time ago where someone brought up some crazy conspiracy theory, like next level conspiracy theory about beings being trapped in human bodies, some of them being from Mars, some being transdimensional Jews And the Jews were feminine energies, and the Martian were male energy. And the Martians were evil because they destroyed their civilization through a Lucifer event. It, that was an hour and a half video that I watched a couple times, and every time I was laughing so much by how crazy it was. Some of you guys might be into those crazy conspiracy theory. I know Graham Hancock is popular, and he is partially on that particular bend. I like conspiracy theories myself. I like weird history and weird archaeology, but there are points where I put a bar and I say, like, no, at that point you've reached the crazy side rather than the smart side. Here, let's take that crazy side and push it to 11. That actually works in comic books. That will work in a TV series. In real life, it's going to be a hard sell for me, at least. Unfortunately, I'm not able to find that video again. I added somewhere on my Facebook profile, but that was 12 years ago. I'd have to really dig to try to find it. I honestly adore this type of occult sci-fi thriller. You've got a man trying to figure out, like, what's going on. Why is there occult things going on? Why is there a superhero saving a plane that just blew up and a bunch of people? This is a great example of that. I feel that going through Donovan, we get the feeling that there's someone trying to hide something. Everybody's insane. That's also a possibility. Where do we stand here? As a reader, we know that there's something going on because we've seen the prologue, but other than that, we don't have much. So it keeps you on your toes. Very interesting there. It's also fun to have a story outside of the US for one. I've been reviewing US comics quite a bit recently. I said it on Twitter. I was going to try to do something else, but let's say we'll see how it goes. This one here is different. I'm somewhere else. I'm in Europe. I'm in the Slavic countries. It's nice to also see a terrorist from Chechnya. Those were fairly common in the late 90s, early 2000s during the whole shebang between Russia and Chechnya. A type of character we don't see as often once again in American comic. I really don't like the pacing here with the prologue and the epilogue. Just give me everything in one block. You could have taken all of the prologue and the epilogue. I would have put it either at the start to just give us a direct idea of what's going on, or all at the end. So you have Donovan going on that chase, trying to figure out what's going on, and then you get the whole story. Once you're in the main story, the pacing is good. You follow Donovan, you see how he's going step by step to try to get all the details he needs for his story. This is really paced as a mystery thriller. It's not paced as an action book or anything along those lines. So it works for what it does. And it's nice that Donovan is somewhat of an everyman. He's not a special anything. He's just a journalist trying to follow a story. And I guess he found it. That's the best way to put it. All right, reading this book, I was really into it. The mystery, the intrigue, government conspiracies. That's really nice. That's stuff of great storytelling. Stuff I liked in like Monster or even 20th Century Boy, if we're really looking at manga in that kind of same area. Sadly, number two, I've read it. It really amped up the superhero stuff, which really broke my immersion into the story. I'll still read this comic. I think it is worth it, and I'll still buy it, and my son's interested in it as well. Pretty decent. It's a PG book. I wouldn't recommend it to younger kids or to kids that don't have an understanding, or not a kid that you can have a talk with if necessary. There's some swearing, violent action, blood, etc., but there's no over the top gore. It's not going to reach that mature rank, as in, let's say, No One, Spawn, etc. This is another one of those books where I would say, yeah, just go with the Franco-Belgian style. Do an hardcover with maybe two or three of these combined together, release it, do another hardcover 6 months, 8 months later, every little bit. It would be better than the monthly floppy in this case. It would keep better as well, and it would have a better interaction with the readers. So I thank you very much for watching me today. I hope you guys have a very nice day. Keep on reading comic, keep on enjoying them. I will keep analyzing them, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.